This is the most dangerous, the most despicable human being that I have ever encountered. This monster must be ended.
Hello world, hello everybody, and yes, I've just watched the second mini-movie of Sherlock Series 4, The Lying Detective. And first of all, before watching this episode, hello Mog, my cat is here. Before watching this episode, there's one thing that excited me the most, is the fact that Toby Jones is in it. And that's right, Stephen Moffat's wild card. And what I mean by that is, if you remember, there was one episode of Doctor Who, and from Matt Smith's Doctor Who, more importantly, and it was the Dream Lord episode. And if you remember that episode, it's where Matt Smith's Doctor Who, Rory and Amy are stuck in this mind-bending situation, and the storyline presents to us that there's another force at will inside the TARDIS, and to me as a viewer, I thought it was the Valeyard, but it was played by Toby Jones. And what an amazing character Toby Jones played in that episode. And now back to Sherlock. For 80% of this episode, we've got this incredible combatant for Sherlock, this manipulative, power-hungry celebrity who has influence over the people about the charities that he funds, and the fact that he's a philanthropist, and it's all about him doing good for society. And by the way, to all UK viewers out there, does that sound like anyone in particular over the past 40 years? Does the word Jimmy Savile mean anything to you? Because Toby Jones almost is the embodiment of Jimmy Savile. If you don't know who Jimmy Savile is, please Google him, because you'll find out who he is. And Toby Jones embodies this character so well. He's such a... his character is essentially someone who... he just wants to tell people how much of a fucking arsehole he is and how much of a nasty piece of work he is, and then take it away from them. And Jimmy Savile essentially did that in the United Kingdom. He committed all these crimes and nobody really knew about it because of the, or should I say, people took a blind eye to it. People turned their head away from him because of the influence he had over society. It was flawless, it was brilliant, and what an amazing actor Toby Jones is. I bow to you, Toby Jones. I'm just going to consult my notes, by the way, because I took notes from this episode. It's awesome. By the way, yeah, this is the best episode I've seen of Sherlock since the first ever episode with the taxi driver. I'm sure I mentioned that last week. So, in other words, thank God we've had a long break away from Sherlock, because they've come up with this wonderful TV. It's brilliant, I love it. So, my first notes were... where's my first notes gone? Oh, it's like a maze. Alright, here we go. Because of the death of Mary and so on, we're under the impression that Sherlock has completely lost his mind and he's jacking up, he's taking loads of drugs. And from the moment that the episode starts, Sherlock's character is presented to us in a way that he kind of he's picking at life, he's picking at reality, and he's trying to create his own reality inside his own drug-infused mind. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, I won't get to the end yet but there's a brilliant payoff. But he's picking at moments, and then us as a viewer, we're seeing the programme broken into memories and moments, and that's how well directed the episode is. Put it this way, Sherlock Holmes could have directed this episode. That's how good it is. And for me, that tells me that Sherlock Holmes isn't just Benedict Cumberbatch. Sherlock Holmes is the entire production team working all together to give us the best TV that we could ever possibly get. And that's how I felt about this episode. It was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. The next note I made was, this felt like a Jeremy Brett episode. As in Jeremy Brett from the 1980s Sherlock Holmes. Now, we're not talking about the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, because the best Jeremy Brett stuff was the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. And there's some absolutely blinding episodes of Sherlock Holmes played by Jeremy Brett. And the funny thing is, at the time, Jeremy Brett was going through a serious tragedy in his life because his best friend and his wife had passed away, and he channeled this kind of tragedy in his life into his acting, and it completely blew me away. And I still remember it today. I mean, I'm 37 years old, so I was watching that when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and oh my God, it really blew me away. And I saw moments of that, moments of great Jeremy Brett in this episode, in Cumberbatch's acting, and I was like, this is just, excuse my language, but this was fucking amazing. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are aware of Sherlock Holmes, and they're aware of the books, and they're aware of the history, and they're aware of dodgy Robert Downey Jr. movies, sorry. But go back and watch Jeremy Brett, honestly, because you can see that these guys, Moffat, Gatiss, Cumberbatch, have really come together, and they've created the best possible Sherlock Holmes episodes that I've ever seen in the modern age. It's brilliant. I mean, I'm getting a bit carried away. Yes, I know, because you know I shit on this, but that's only because I want perfection, and this episode is pretty borderline perfection, to be honest with you. Brilliant. Anyway, back to the notes. The next comment I made was Sherlock's reality. And yeah, I spoke about that earlier in regards that Sherlock is clearly high as a kite, and he's been injecting himself with all these different drugs, whether it's heroin or anything else. But it's all for his benefit. It's not for anybody else. And that's what I love about Sherlock. He's actually not going through this because of John, because of Mary. He's going through all this turmoil because of himself. And it's interesting because the way the episode's put forward is that he's picking on Toby Jones for his own benefit, because he believes that this philanthropist, this celebrity, is beyond touchable. He can't be arrested. He can't be apprehended by the law. And Sherlock wants to take him down. But in order for Sherlock to take him down, he has to appease everything and all the people in his life in order to achieve his goal. And that's a brilliant, brilliant thing. It really, really is. So let's put ourselves in Toby Jones's shoes. And Toby Jones sees Sherlock as being a wreckhead. He sees Sherlock as being a genius who is now tainted, who can't solve his crime, and he's the perfect victim for his character, because obviously Toby Jones is a serial killer and he wants to take him down. So he sees Sherlock as the ultimate kill. But it's all in Sherlock's reality. It's all a game. And yes, fantastic. Let's consult the notes again. The irony is, the notes that I've made here is exactly what I've just said. So let's move on. Now, I've sort of covered kind of the dot to dot in regards to the structure of the plot. Sherlock's off his face. Toby Jones is the antagonist. Now, the one thing that always brings me down in Sherlock episodes, as you know from my previous review, is Martin Freeman's Watson. And inevitably, or should I say, in hindsight, his marriage to Mary and that entire relationship. And now that she's dead, she actually plays a better character, because throughout this episode, she plays part of John Watson's consciousness, and because he's not willing to kind of go through the death of his wife properly, he can't concentrate on his now infant daughter because she's gone, and he can't do it alone. I went into this episode thinking, oh, here we go again, more Martin Freeman sulking. But I'll tell you what, he was brilliant in this episode. And again, I'm going to go back to the original first ever episode of Sherlock, where we see Martin Freeman's Watson. And we see him as a guy who is got a walking stick because he's convinced that he's wounded. And in this episode, we see Watson convincing himself that he's wounded. And in that first ever episode, there's one person that brought Watson out of that self-shame, that kind of world of self-pity, and that was Sherlock. And that's what happens in this episode, one way or another. Whether Watson knows it or not, Sherlock has dragged him back in. He's dragged him back into the game. And it's interesting because that's a constant line throughout this episode. Get back in the game. And it is brilliant. It's funny because it almost feels like there's like 6 months between last week's episode and this week's episode in regards to filming. Because Martin Freeman looks better. His acting's improved. He's not acting like Martin Freeman. He's not acting like he's, stuck in the office with Ricky Gervais. He really does kind of look, he's really acting, and it's really, really good. And I can't really say it more, how impressed I am by Martin Freeman. And I don't like the guy, but god damn it, this was brilliant, absolutely spot on, brilliant acting, spot on moments of emotion, and picking at moments when almost like Martin Freeman has witnessed someone else going through grief, and he's like written it down, and he's practiced how that feels, and he's rehearsed it over and over again. It was really, really good, absolutely brilliant, thoroughly loved it. Back to the notes. I've already mentioned the Dream Lord, that was my next point. Toby Jones, man. And tell you what, give credit to the people who put his makeup on him and everything, because he looks like a seedy, horrible, manipulative little bastard. And I give credit to those guys, because, and it's interesting, because I always thought that Toby Jones is one of those kind of actors who looks in the mirror a lot when he's in character, I mean, he is a proper method actor, and the funny thing is that the opening shot of this episode, or the opening scene in this episode, is of Toby Jones. And it's like, you are a master, man. You are a master. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Back to the notes. The Doors of Perception. I wrote that down because of what... Excuse me. I wrote that down because of what I mentioned earlier on about Holmes, is... Holmes in this episode had a plan. And we know this plan because of, if you watched last week, spoiler alert, last week at the end of the episode, he opened this disc and it was a DVD, and it was a message from Mary. Now, this episode, from Sherlock's point of view, is essentially Sherlock answering the demands of Mary before she died. Now, Sherlock took it to the extreme. And what Sherlock did, he was willing to put his own sanity at risk in order to perform the goal of saving his best friend. And in order to do that, he had to take all these drugs but still stay true to himself as a person. And that's where I wrote down the words doors of perception. Because taking drugs, or the right drugs, opens your mind to so many different possibilities. But because we know that Sherlock is so trained and he's got his little mind palace, that regardless of how random it is, it's all going to come together and he's going to save John and he's going to solve the crime. And we get all that in this episode. It really, really is spot on. Brilliant writing. Good on you, Moffat and Gatiss. Now, I'm not going to use my notes for the final point in this video. Now, there's a moment in this episode that Watson says, and he challenges Mycroft, and he talks about another brother of Holmes. So there's a third Holmes, essentially. When I heard that line, I thought, oh, this is gonna come a cropper. This is gonna come to us either by the end of this episode or it's gonna come to us in the next episode. And I was absolutely right. Now, the ultimate reveal was interesting because I kind of wanted it to be Toby Jones, but it wasn't. And the reveal ties in to the first part of this episode, which is to do with Watson's kind of psychological infidelity toward Mary and the fact that he found another woman attractive. And we found by the end of this episode that the woman he found attractive was a Holmes. And I'm sorry, earlier on I said I wasn't going to spoil this episode, but I can't help it. And then we find out that Watson's psychiatrist is one and the same person. But because Watson's been so involved in his own kind of grief and so on, there's not been a recognition from Watson. He hasn't recognised her from the bus or whatever, or this so-called text relationship that he's had with this previous woman while he was with Mary. And that kind of made me feel a bit down, to be honest with you. It really, really did. I wasn't particularly happy with that reveal until at the end of the episode we realise that Holmes is back on his feet again, until he clicks. And he remembers a moment in this episode regarding the so-called daughter of Toby Jones's character, and he realises there's a hidden message there, and the hidden message is "miss me," which makes me think even more. And it makes me think that the Moriarty that we know from previous episodes is not the Moriarty at all. And the fact is, Moriarty is actually the third Holmes. And I actually quite like that. I know I started this moment negatively, but I like the fact that Holmes's nemesis, or nemeses, are actually his own siblings. I mean, Mycroft is clearly a combatant for Holmes, and now we find out that the third Holmes is a combatant for him as well. So, yeah. I'm intrigued for next week. I really, really am. So much so that I'd happily do a constant conversation about it. I really, really could. But anyway, all in all, this episode was pretty fucking amazing. I absolutely loved it. This is definitely 100% one of the best episodes, maybe the top 3 of the best episodes of Sherlock that we've ever been blessed with. There's no two ways about it. Absolutely loved it. It recovered from so much of doubt that I felt towards it. It really, really did. It captured moments of old school Holmes and new school Holmes and tainted Holmes, but Tainted Holmes is no lesser of a man than Holmes himself. And that's why I love it. And that's why this is the best Conan Doyle adaptation that I've seen so far in the past 10 years. So yeah, absolutely loved it. So thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this episode too. Let's talk about some more next week. I can't wait. So always a pleasure, never a chore. Click subscribe if you want to see more. Peace out, and we'll see you next time.